Good afternoon from Australia. Richard Miller, Never Not Here, and our mega tour of what we call Down Under. I suppose in Australia you wouldn't have to say that, you'd have another way of expressing it. And you might just say the center of the universe or something like that, I don't know. But we really kind of look into our psyche and our when you look at everything, what do we have to work with? It's just our attention. It moves or it settles. And maybe we're curious what makes it move and what's the effect of those movements. And if it's a peace and well-being and freedom in life and somehow the ability to enjoy and the ability to do what's appropriate and to engage with what's here and to be creative, then we say that's good, that's our goal. That's what we're looking for. And if somehow there's an anxiety and it keeps popping up that all the wrong things in life repeat too many times, whatever the wrong, our idea about it. And our focus is fragmented and fractured, and we're always looking for something new. I probably should have said that first and the peaceful part second, so at least I could have left you in a good state. And we wonder, then we're kind of spurred on to take a look, how somehow let's look at this life and see what's happening. And in some of our talks we talk about different types of mentality, because we talk about the cognitive, and we talk about the heartfelt, and we talk about the kinesthetic also. So there's not only left and right hemisphere intelligence, but the bodily intelligence. And something about creating, and one way to create is through art. We might say, I'm not an artist, I can't draw a straight line. But maybe there's no straight lines in nature anyhow, so then we're just right. So today we're going to see what we can find about other ways to settle our nerves and settle our lives. And we'll talk a little bit about art. We're with Penny Chesney. So thanks for coming, Penny.
Thank you, Richard. It's nice to be here. I heard you say, what did you say? Okay, the people who don't believe that they have any artistic talent and they can't draw a straight line. Oh, I keep on here. I couldn't even draw a stick figure. It's only because they have never tapped into their inner core, their inner creative core. Frequently when I have students, I would much prefer, no, that's not true. I love as much the people who really, really, really believe that they have no artistic talent at all, as much as those that are professional artists that come to expand their work. They both come to me. But the people who really believe they haven't got it are the ones that have no expectations, and they're ones that really get into the whole process, and they're the ones who discover the most wonderful things about themselves, and they're the ones who produce the most spontaneous, beautiful, spiritual artwork, because they haven't already been trained as artists.
That's an amazing revelation, because you say no expectations, and expectations always take us down the deep and narrow path, and also to disappointments and judgments, because like if we expect something, how many times is it going to come true just like we expect it?
Yeah.
And so then we're going to judge it, and we're going to say, no, it didn't work. My life is going awry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just so delightful to see these people leaving the class. In fact, I had one girl that came to one woman came to a 2-day workshop, the inner creativity workshop that I ran, and she took her first day's work home to her family, and nobody believed that she did it. So the next day, she made sure that she did it, she signed it in a manner that they could not argue, because we use oil pastels and then we paint over the top of them and scrape them back. So she signed it in oil pastels and painted it over the top of it, so they could not deny that she had done this work. And yet this was a woman who believed absolutely conclusively that she didn't have any talent at all. The other interesting thing about this work is the fact that I had to get qualifications. In actual fact, I did a course with Professor Stephanie Merritt, who was from San Diego, and she came here to Australia in the bonding method of guided imagery and music, so that I had the qualifications to work with people at this level. Steph was quite excited about the fact that I was taking it into a new area, rather than, because normally it's used in psychology and psychiatry. But I was taking it into an art school situation and I did my postgraduate on all of this, and I ran it through 3,500 kids at school. And boy, oh boy, I didn't miss one of them. And I don't know about you, Richard, but I wasn't writing any letters to my teachers at school, thanking them profusely for having taught me when I was in high school. I've got a file in my cabinet at home that thick from students in high schools who wrote to me and raved about me coming there and asking me to come back again to do this course with them. It was a huge success, because what you're doing is the one thing about the inner creative core, it lies in exactly the same place as your spiritual core. It is no coincidence that the very earliest examples of artwork, sculpture, cave paintings, it's all spiritually based. Comes from the same source.
So many times we're talking about creativity in arts and in any kind of performance, actually, and they call it being in the zone, or somehow really being so into what you're doing and so interested and so fascinated by the result that's just unfolding in front of your eyes. And I know something about painting. I know sometimes paint will walk, it walks around and does things that you say, I don't know how I did this, but this paint just mixed just perfectly this time.
Yeah.
And
well, in these circumstances, I take them through it's a very loose guided imagery, so there's plenty of room for them to be in their own journey. And I just let them go for it. I just give them the keys of how to get in there, and I bring them back again. And it's interesting to see them actually run from the meditation couch and go straight. The draw is so intense to get there and create. And I found this too, because, how I discovered this in the first place was because I lost my son and daughter-in-law in a car accident, and I went to a Russian doctor of parapsychology who happened to be living in a little village near where my farm was in Tasmania when this happened, and he was well known for his grief recovery sessions. I went to him for grief recovery. For a start, the first thing that he did was he used colour swatches to analyse my emotional state. Not only me, but the other members of our family who were suffering from grief. And he was spot on, absolutely 100%. If you chose the colours that he opened up in front of you, and you had to do it spontaneously, that one, he was hitting them at you. There wasn't a secret you could keep from him. He could really see right down inside your soul. One of my family members, not me, was so depressed they were suicidal, hadn't said a word to anybody. Roman was onto it right there, straight away. And the other thing that I noticed, my sessions with him were once a week. Now, I was in my third year of degree in fine arts at uni when all of this happened. I went straight into artist block. I just lost my best friend, my only son. My only grandchild was permanently injured and in hospital. I had a custody battle on my hands. There was no way I could even think about painting or drawing. Well, I lost my creative zing entirely, went straight into artist block. But whenever I was at Raymond's and I came home, there was nothing else I could do except create. I went straight to all my gear. Frequently I would lay out huge sheets of paper on the table, and it would just pour out of me. Us Australians are a little bit rude and crude and unattractive at times, but I always say it was creative diarrhea. It was just going out of me onto the paper. And it was all amazing. And I was just watching the happening. And the other incredible thing that at one stage, when I was using crayons, because I just wanted to get in there as fast as possible, I was using both hands. I'm not ambidextrous. It was a completely unconscious thing. It was so important to get this image straight out onto the paper as fast as possible. I was working like this, and I'm going, hang on, the logical part of me was watching this. And then as...
So in a way, it was kind of like something was downloading, because this was...
Oh, absolutely. There was no doubt
there was
about
not,
it.
You weren't doing it, right? You know, because, I mean, it was driving both your hands. And,
I didn't even have any idea in my mind about what I would draw before I started. I'd come home from Romans, and I would just go for it. And sometimes I would work all night long with incredibly intense energy, and yet not feel tired or worn out. It was like, as you say, downloading grief, downloading confusion, all sorts of things.
So this was kind of coming out of your body and out of your
I guess so.
Your kinesthetic movements was actually kind of releasing
Yep.
A big chunk of your life, and then you saw the connection between Roman and your your creativity, that you were able to duplicate that later in life by something similar, right? I mean,
yeah. The other thing is we're trying to put these things through the tertiary system. At our University of Tasmania in Launceston at that time, it was very frowned on to do anything cosmic New Age. And in fact, quite a few people had been failed, both in degree and postgraduate years, because their work was considered to be new cosmic New Age. I knew that, and I thought to myself, I have to be ratifiable at tertiary level, and at that stage, very, very close friend of mine, Diane Jensen, is a psychologist in San Diego, and I had talked to her about what I'd experienced with Roman sessions and explained how I wanted to learn to be... I needed the qualifications to be able to do what he did in a classroom situation, and that was when she sent me Stephanie Merritt's book, which is... The Bonnie Method of Guided Imagery and Music, which is a teacher's manual. I read through that, and then next thing I knew, I just went straight in, contacted Stephanie, and there's no such thing as coincidence. She just happened to be coming to Australia to do work at both Monash and Adelaide universities. So I had to talk to a few tame, housebroken lecturers that I knew, and they arranged for her to come to Tasmania, and I arranged for other students, and we did the full 5-day level 1 intensive in Tasmania.
I guess they were defining cosmic and New Age, maybe thinking it was too commercial or too... I mean, what were they liking at the time? Would they call it realism? Would they call it classical? Would they call it...
It's not a general. I couldn't even
traditional,
say.
Or
I couldn't even say that every lecturer at uni was in agreement. But the point is that the powers that be that give you the big tick or the big cross were very strongly against anything that they considered to be what they said cosmic New Age. I know that they were dead against, this particular group right at the top of the hierarchy were dead against things like yoga, anything that was alternative at all.
I know some art schools are really against realism, and they say that's kind of passé or old.
Yeah, this one was too.
Yeah.
Yep. See, I was already a graphic designer. I used to be the graphic designer at the same university for 3.5 years before I went there as a student. And the whole idea of going there in the first place was I could draw anything that I could see, but I couldn't create from the way I felt. I couldn't create from inside. And I went to uni believing that a 4-year degree would show me how to do that. That didn't happen. It was actually the death of my son and the subsequent grief recovery. I tried really hard to be, it's the difference between being subjective and objective. If you're, what I was doing before, the sort of work you saw there with the eagle, That's objective work. They're after subjective work. And they give a lot of fancy words, and they quote Nietzsche and all of these people, but really, you're still using your logical mind to create something subjective. The difference between that and what I experienced was it really was my emotions screaming out to, as you said, download all the images that were inside me. The confusion, my grief, my loss, it just all came out. I submitted those drawings at the end of the year because I still wanted to try and finish that year. The thing that was interesting about that was I never got on particularly well with my drawing lecturer there because he considered that I was taking up the space of a school leaver. I was already a known artist in Tasmania. I had an annual exhibition of my landscapes and bird studies every year. And I was getting good money for my work. So he really considered that the space that I was taking up at the art school would have been better if it was some school leaver. And I could see his point of view. But boy, after the accident, and I came back with this, I didn't come back. I just left the drawings in there. I said, you should see these. And both he and the art history lecturer came to me and they said, this is the most amazing portfolio of work that we've ever seen. It looks like you have opened your soul and we are walking through everything you experienced. And they gave me the best marks. I mean, they were amazed. And this stuff quite literally was done on my kitchen table. No hard work. It just went, oh, there it is. Yeah. And that's what I wanted. My parents were artists. What I wanted to know was, is this a phenomenon that happened because I'm already artistic? It's in my blood. Or would it happen to everybody? Is it part of this process that Roman was doing? And I thought, okay, let's take that through to my postgraduate and find out for myself. And that's why I got in touch with Stephanie Merritt. That's why I did the training. And then I ran it for 3.5 months at the Forester District Schools in Tasmania. And then the Youth in Prison scheme found out about it and got me to go there. The Baha'i youth who experienced it at school invited me to come to their school holiday. They enjoyed it so much in their class, they wanted me to come and run it during their
Let's just lay it out so everybody can really have a good understanding. But it sounds like you're doing some guided, you said from the meditation couch, so you're actually stilling people in a way, finding a stillness or something like that. And then and then is there some imagery there that
oh, absolutely.
That they create themselves, or that you said you left it kind of open?
Oh, it's very open. One of the things, and I've been into all this cosmic stuff now for 22 years. The secret of real magic is colour. And it's the secret to accessing all sorts of things about yourself. Roman did it. Okay, I told you about the colour swatches. But when he was taking me down, or all of us down, into our different meditations, he did it using colour, visualising colour. And most of the people that I know that work in this manner do exactly the same thing. So you visualise, say for instance, a red mist, and you breathe it in and you imagine your body shifting into red. And then you go through the whole range of colours, through orange, yellow, green, so on, right the way through into magenta, and then into white. And once you're in the area of white, from my point of view, then I would just keep them floating there and just saying, see what comes up. Images will appear on the white and they will disappear, or another pathway may open to you, and that's about as controlled as it gets. But I keep an eye on them. If they have had trauma, then they can go into some dark places. So I keep an eye on them. And, of course, nowadays, with all of the other tricks that I've developed over the years, I have a way of just being able to walk up to them and just gently being able to lay my hands on their shoulders and just calm them and take them through that carefully. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not interested in being a psychologist, but I really, really, really need to protect my students from any of those dark places, and I know how to do that. I know exactly how to do that.
So then something through colors is a calming effect, and actually it must, in a way, turn off the mind, right? It must turn off the mind. In other words, it turns off trauma and it turns off tension.
Not
right?
necessarily turns off. What it does, I disagree with you there. What it actually does, well, for a start, once you're doing that, it links, you've got whole brain activity. It is one of the basis of a lot of whole brain work. So consequently, you're linking your left and right brain, and you are deeply, you are accessing deeply your unconscious or your subconscious mind. That's exactly what it does. That's exactly what Roman did for me. I mean, to just give you one example, we were going through a pretty nasty custody battle over my only grandchild. Still don't have any others. That's it. Finished. So I was a real mess while this was going on, and one day an affidavit arrived in the letterbox when I was heading off into town, and I read it at the letterbox, and it was a straw that broke the camel's back. We tried to get these people to come and get to know us and make some sense, and Roman, when I got to Roman's, I was in tears. I just couldn't speak, and he said whatever's wrong, and I passed him over the affidavit, and he read it, and by this stage Roman got to know us. We'd had him out to dinner a few times. And he said, right, I thought he was crazy, because he said, right, okay, when I'm still going to take you on the same journey that I was going to take you before, but on the way back we're going to do a detour, and let's see if you have the strength of mind to change your own reality. And I thought, what are you talking about, changing your own reality? That's impossible, absolutely impossible. You know, this is the logical penny. This is what I'm saying, you know, like, really and truly, I was just so logical, I thought that was nuts. And then he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He took me on the journey. The first journey I don't even remember, but the detour, I remember it like it was a real living memory, as though it really, really happened, because your body is in it. It's not like dreaming at all. It's like you step through this framework and you're on another picture You're in another reality entirely, and it is just as real as this one. You can smell, taste, feel, everything. Everything. It's just as real as this one. And he took me to this place where my daughter-in-law's family were, and of course we had to mind our P's and Q's while we were doing all these court meetings, so I hadn't actually told him what I thought about them. And he said, all the people that are attacking you are in this cave. He said, I want you to stand here. And he's got you in such a deep state that you're really out to it. He codes you so that your finger comes up like this when you've done what he asks you to do. And then he knows to progress. And you don't even think about it. You don't even need to think, I've got to raise my thumb now. It happens. Your body and your unconscious mind are linked together like that. And anyway, he got me to think about what I wanted to say to these people. And of course, under the circumstances, I wanted to really tell them their pedigree, which I had been unable to do in court. I knew to mind my P's and Q's when we were having these court meetings. And I thought, right, here's my opportunity. And I stood there in front of the cave. And I thought about, yeah, here's my chart. So the finger went up, and then I went, well, the rules in this other reality are exactly the same as the natural rules here. If you step from a bright sunny day into a dark space, you've got to wait for your eyes to adjust to the light. So they could see me long before I could see them. And by the time my eyes adjusted, and my daughter-in-law came from a big family, I'll tell you, they were all running away. They were trying to find places to hide, every little nook and cranny and crack in the cave wall. They were trying to hide from me. And I was so surprised. And of course, you can't talk to people, even when you do it, want to tell them their pedigree. You can't do it if they're running away from you. So I just called out to them. I said, hey, what are you doing running away, hiding from me? This is ridiculous. I'm just an ordinary person. I'm nothing to be frightened of. Coming over here and talk like rational adults. And then I never said any of the things that I'd made up my mind that I was going to say out there. Not one. Some higher self or common sense took over. And all I did was talk about my granddaughter's needs and how this pulling her and arguing and toing and froing and making her go here and making her go there was harming her. And how we had to settle it all out and iron out our differences for Carmen's sake, because she was the one that was most important. And then I looked around, and remember, I'm not on a spiritual journey at this stage, but it shows you that deep down your higher self always knows. Because then I looked around at this cave, and it wasn't like a pretty cave with stalactites and stalagmites. It was just a big damp hole in the rock. And I said, what are you doing in this whole dark, damp old cave? Looks a lovely sunny day outside. Coming out into the light, and I dragged them all out of the cave, took them out to the sandy spot in front of the cave. Then I gave them a bit more of a sensible pep talk, we've really got to try and pull together. No more of this nonsense. And then I gave them all and I said, don't go back into the cave, stay out here in the light. Gave them all a group hug and walked away. And then Raymond took me out of the meditation. And at that time, most of the time my granddaughter was staying with us, but they had custody over a 3-week period. They had her for 5 days, and they also had her for another weekend, and this was one of the 5-day ones. And only the week before, on a Wednesday, this was on a Tuesday. The week before, we'd had a court meeting. They told us they were going to fight us to the bitter end. That kid's going to be worth $1 million worth of damages, and you're not going to get your hippie hands on the scent of it, all that sort of unpleasantness that was unnecessary. So that had only, they were still talking like that a week ago. And then here was this whole thing happening. And so what happened, when Carmen was away, that's why I went on and tried to finish my degree. Not because I necessarily wanted to do the 6 months, but because it gave me a diversion. If Carmen wasn't there, I would be worrying the whole time about her. So it gave me something else. At least being in at the university and around other people was good for me. So I was in there the next day, and my studio lecturer came out and got me, and he said, your daughter's on the phone, she sounds upset, you better take it in my office. So I went into Ren's office and picked it up. My daughter was there, and she was having a bit of a cry, and I said, what's happened? And she said, Lynn just rang me. She's giving up the case. This was 24 hours exactly after I did that.
What do you think that you were in that cave? I mean, was that a council of the ancestors, or do you need to interpret it, or was it just their spirit selves? I don't
think it's important to interpret it.
Important.
I think the important thing is
your
to
experience,
see,
right?
Yeah. Because one of the things that I found is since all of this happened, this was just the beginning of it all. This is how a logical woman came to be a shaman. Because after this, I became an involuntary shaman. Now, what that actually means is I'd step into other realms. And believe me, when it first happened, it scared me to the point I thought I was having a stroke. Because the first symptom of it is paralysis. I can't move. I get very, very tired beforehand. And I can't say, oh, I think I might go on a shamanic journey. No way. It doesn't work that way. They call me from the other side, and I don't have a lot of choice in the matter. I get overwhelmingly tired. I go and lay down. The minute my head hits the pillow, it's nothing like falling asleep. I'm wide awake. When it first started to happen, I used to have to fight the panic, because that's the first thing that happened. I mean, there's no relaxing meditation about this, my boy. This is, you can't move, can't even open your eyes. Sometimes the only part that I can move, oddly enough, is that same finger that Roman that right little finger on my right hand, I can always move that irrespective, but everything else is completely and utterly paralyzed. And there's this massive, I always say that it's white, but I can't ever say that I see it as white energy, like electricity that's roaring through me, and then I roll over. My body stays exactly where it was, but I roll out of my body and I roll into a different reality. And I operate in that.
So then your body is just paralyzed there, and
I don't know.
And you don't even know. You lose touch with it.
Yeah, it's gone. I'm back there. Yeah, I'm operating in a new reality. I've got a younger, better body, no old aches and pains.
Yeah.
I'm galloping around doing all sorts of things on the other side. But the interesting thing is, I always know what it is I've got to achieve while I'm there. Usually, I am never surprised or phased out by anything that I see on the other side. And I'm not going to go into detail, so don't ask me.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like my first take on it is, first of all, I find it fascinating that you don't interpret it and you don't say that these were those and this, and I went to here and I talked to that guy, and something that's just fascinating because it's so powerful just to let it happen.
It's a hugely powerful thing. It took me a long time to understand what it was that was happening to me. I really didn't have any idea. And there's not a lot of information. Wasn't in those days, especially down in Tasmania. I had to join the Theosophical Society to order in the books, despite the fact that I was at university, because there was nothing in the university on any of this. And it took me until I actually moved up here to understand what was happening with the shamanic thing. Because when I was doing my guided imagery and music training with Stephanie, it happened 3 times. 3 times it happened.
So somehow colors maybe some kind of like a portal. Colors somehow, and you
there
can
are
say
portals,
that
but
a portal would be like where where you said the halves of your brain go together or something like that, or somehow there's a connection, there's linkages.
I don't know whether or not you realise it, but that I was explaining about the kaleidoscope of colour and allowing your body to shift into the different colours, it's the foundation of all practices. I've looked into this because I've looked for explanations about why these things happen. Like, for instance, Wiccans, they call it the crystal countdown. They do it before they cast any spells. You go through all of these different, even religious, psychological, they all do it. They all do it. It is something very, very, very profound. Don't know whether I would call it a portal though, because once I'm on the other side, I'm quite familiar with what portals look like. And actually, the person who was able to explain that all to me was Hank Wesselman, your Hank Wesselman from America, who also was a paleontologist who also happened to be, I think middle life or something. He suddenly experienced what I was experiencing, involuntary shamanism.
Right. So somehow the colors can be some kind of a linkage to move toward it.
It's to do with your brain.
It's not all that sophisticated of colors, right?
It releases some magic in your brain.
It's just colors that you imagine. It's not like you're flashing flashcards that are sophisticated colors. They're just say green is green, or light green or dark green,
and it's important they be in the order, and it's important to allow your body to shift into the color. So you lay there, you imagine you're breathing in red, and then you imagine every part of yourself, your clothes, your face, your hair, everything turning red. And then you do it again with orange and yellow and green and turquoise and dark blue and violet and magenta. And then but with each one of them, you've got to remember to breathe it out or expel it from your body before you take the next one on.
When you get to white, you don't. Do you, like you say, feel your feet turning red? Now your ankles
the
are
whole
turning
lot.
red.
The whole lot.
You're really, really, really taking
You're
it
really
right through,
shifting into the color. That's right.
Yeah. You don't just. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting it. And then, but what's happening now is you don't even need colors. I mean, it just when somebody wants you, they knock on your door, you lie down, and bingo, you're gone.
That's a different thing. That was what started me off, and that somehow or another put me into a situation where maybe the other side noticed me, or... You see, the point is that not long after all this started happening, and believe me, you're looking at a real logical person. I used to play in my dad's engineering workshop. My brother's a geophysicist. We were always encouraged to be really, really logical. So this was a really hard thing for me to embrace all of this. And when I started hearing voices when I was wide awake and seeing pillars of light moving around me, that was it. I thought I was a candidate for the rubber room. I thought I'd lost the plot entirely. And that took a long time for me to be able to come to terms with it. What I actually did was, with these voices, that was an interesting thing, because I'd had a really hard childhood. My mum was, what they used to say in the olden days, a difficult woman. So I'd had a pretty rough childhood. And I had a pretty low self-esteem as a result of that rough childhood. I was always being put down. Not by my dad, but by my mum. And the thing about these voices that started up and they weren't in my head. I always hearing them in my left ear. One time, the first time it happened, I was down at the beach, and one of the things I'd picked up was this ritual of gratification. We're not grateful enough for the simple things in life. We don't take enough time to be grateful for things that we take for granted. And I'd been in America the year before my son had died, and I was in Santa Fe, and I met an old Indian at Santa Fe, and he told me that my foundation would be to face the four directions and to give thanks for the four elements, to actually feel it, not to just go, oh gee, thanks for air, not an empty verbal platitude, but to use your imagination. Well, it's different for you. You're Northern Hemisphere. North and South changes. But down here, East first, always East first. Think about air and think about the things about air that you really not like. You know, like that cooling breeze on a hot day. The whole idea is trying to capture the gratitude in your heart so you can actually go, oh yeah, that feels good. Or the beautiful sunset that raises the wow factor. And, of course, your ability to heal with your hands. It comes from air as well. And then you go to fire and you do the same thing. For us, that's north. Fire is always near the equator.
So then fire, what's the imagery like? Digestion. You can actually make energy out of food.
The sun in the sky.
Right.
Volcanoes.
The sun is on you. And
volcanoes do good things for the planet. They're only bad for man. They could do good things for the planet. They're the valve on the pressure cooker, mate. You know, like, you've got to be grateful for the simple things in life. There's a molten core in the planet. Without that, the planet would be dead. The more you can expand your realms of gratitude for each one of the different elements, the greater your life will be, I tell you. He was right. He was spot on. So it's a bit of
earth and water then, right?
Hmm?
Then earth and water.
Yeah, then water. That's right.
Water's west then?
Yeah, that's right, because down here in the southern hemisphere, the Earth energy travels anti-clockwise, not clockwise. It's the opposite to your side. Mm-hmm. I have a few debates with people here, and they go, "You're doing the wrong way round." And I go, they say, "Oh, in the books I read, it says da 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 da." And I say, "And where was that book published?" "Oh, America." "Oh, England." I go, "That's the word. We're in the southern hemisphere. Duh." It's all logical, mate. See, logic does have its value. Yeah. But you got to balance it out with the other stuff.
We were just talking about that just actually some hours ago, and we were saying, like, of course, reality is not logical. Reality, okay, logic is a verbal model that's in a container, a linear container, and presented one after another as a sequence. And then it has to come to somewhere where we want it to come to, like the feel-good space, and then it's logical. Like it has to tie in a knot. But reality is really a matrix, or we even said it's not even a matrix.
Multi-layered.
It's a multiplex, we say.
Yeah.
Because a matrix is like a man's creation of a multiplex, and it's got a lot of little squares, and you fill it all up, But really, the true reality has got no squares, It's just like a multiplex, everything happening at once. And so then logic is not all that honorable, It's just man's, it's a man's tool.
It is. But
and you're somehow in touch with way more than just logic, And then somehow, if you want to communicate to men and get them to kind of get on board with you, then you got to kind of bring it down to this linear container.
But I never wanted any of this in the first place. I always say to my students, I was dragged screaming, kicking and digging my heels in every inch of the way into this cosmic new age. But look, I'm here,
but you're needed, and somehow I guess you've given yourself
I'm
to
very
it.
much
in the end,
needed.
You've given yourself to it, right?
One of my specialities is grief recovery, and that blows me away. You see, I thought I'd lost my son. I thought I'd lost him totally, forever, gone. And then I had to nurse his daughter through horrendous corrective surgery because she was permanently injured. And this is by the time that was happened when she was 15 months old. When she was 8, she went through horrendous corrective surgery, and I had to be there for her 24/7 for a year. And at the end of that year, I was at the end of it was impossible. I couldn't do anything. I was worn to a frazzle. And I came down with pneumonia and I couldn't shake it. And we'd just moved up here, and the reason why we moved from Tasmania to here, because Carmen couldn't have the operation, the Lazaroff method of bone lengthening in Tasmania. We had to come here, so I sold my farm, bought in here, didn't know anybody. It happened her operations were in my second year here, and then, the doctor wanted me to go and have a nice holiday in hospital while they, had me on an antibiotic drip, and there was nobody to look after the kid, 2 horses in the paddock, 2 dogs, 3 cats, and the batteries in my magic wand are flat. What do you do? And so I thought, well, what happened? What really helped me when Andrew died? What really helped me a lot, aside from what Roman did, I had regular sessions of Reiki. And I thought, well, I wonder if that would help. So I made an appointment, and I went out to see this woman who was a master. And she worked on my lungs for probably about 3/4 of an hour to an hour. And there wasn't a lot of difference. There was maybe a minor, but I knew I still had pneumonia. And then she decided she was going to finish off over my eyes. So she moved a chair and came round to the end, and I'm laying flat out like this. And she puts her hand down over my eyes. And I always say to my students now these days, you don't need to push, because I always remember this instant, because she pushed really hard on my head and I was like this, and it was really uncomfortable. So I couldn't relax and nod off or anything like that. But I was meant to stay awake. It was meant to happen. So I was wide awake. And then I was in this different reality. My body was there on the Reiki table and my neck was all uncomfortable. But that was only my body. I was aware of it. But at the same time, I was standing in this other reality. And there was a pathway through all of this beautiful forest, real thick. And my son came around the pathway, just a dirt track. Andrew, he walked straight up to me, big smile on his face. Gave me the biggest hug, physical, totally physical, like he was alive. And while he was hugging me, he said, you can relax now, Mum, the worst of it's over. And then he stood back, still smiling in my face, and he put both his hands on my shoulders, smiled into my face, and he changed into a pillar of emerald green light. And he shot up over my head, because my body's still on
the Reiki table.
On the Reiki table. I was in 2 realities. And he shot up over my head like a rainbow, and then the bit that used to be his feet went up and followed, and I knew exactly what was happening. He went into the crown chakra of the woman who was giving me Reiki. And right at that moment, it felt like, as soon as he was inside her, it felt like I had corks that popped in my instep of both feet. And it felt exactly like my body had been full of dirty bath water, and I could feel it pouring out the soles of my feet. But what was more amazing was I could feel the level of it physically
Wow.
dropped down like this, slowly, 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 slowly. And my kids always called me Electric Mouth, so I'm a good talker, okay? So I wasn't asleep because remember my head's back like this, and I feel, and so as soon as it was all over and done with, this woman took her hands off, and I wasn't asleep, and I knew I'd been cured of pneumonia. And I sat bolt upright, and of course I had my back to her, and I'm doing the old Electric Mouth thing and going, wow, that was the best Reiki I've ever had. It's worked, I haven't got pneumonia, blah, blah, blah. I was so excited. And there was silence. And I put my legs over the side of the table and swung around. She's an older lady. And she was sitting there as white as a sheet. And she was shaking.
Did she know what happened?
Yeah, but she couldn't speak. And I called her husband, and he got a doona, and we got her out onto the veranda, and we got her a glass of brandy, and it was probably 5 minutes or so. And this, if you knew this lady, she's got a bit of an ego. So we put this one up on the calendar. And she actually said, she said, yes, I know you're cured of pneumonia, Penny, but I can't accept any credit for it. That's why I said it should go up on the calendar. And she said, as soon as I put my hands over your eyes, I was taken over in it by an ascended master. And I went, oh, ascended master, eh? That's my boy Andrew.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
What an experience.
And of course, we knew our doctor too, because my granddaughter was close friends of his daughter, and I turned up there next day, and he said that, of course, I'd seen him that day in the morning, and he had given me 1 day to get my affairs in order, and he was going to send an ambulance to come and get me. He said, he said, look, you're going to die unless you get into hospital. I'd had that pneumonia for 6 weeks. But I went in.
How is it that, some of us get these experiences that just, in a way, we're forced into or led into, we're just overcome by them. And others of us think we want to have these experiences and wished we could, and we follow along some shamans and we ask for guidance. And
I never wanted any of it.
And it never happens,
I never wanted any of it. Never wanted any of it.
You wanted to get cured from pneumonia, though.
Oh, I did indeed. But already, you see, the point is, you're talking about being down the track away. I already knew that Reiki was a help. When I was, before, I knew somebody who'd had their whole lives turned around by Reiki. And I'd seen, and also homeopathy. She'd gone through some pretty horrendous stuff. And I watched her improve all the time. Everything that I did to help myself, well, it didn't come from books. I had observed, I was in a university. All sorts of dreadful things happened in university. The same, my interest in crystals happened because all of a sudden one of the students in the art school suddenly disappeared, dropped out, wasn't there anymore. And she was gone for the whole last half of the year. And then she turned up at the beginning of the next year, and we had discovered that she'd gone, I won't go into details, but something pretty horrendous had happened to her. But she had been to a lot of conventional psychologists and psychiatrists and so on to get her through it. But what actually got her through and out the other side, and Rain will have a big smile on his face if he sees this interview, was crystal healing. That got her past this absolutely shocking trauma, whereas the conventional methods didn't. I tried conventional methods too, and they were limited. This is going back a long time. They've got newer techniques now, and I have got friends that are psychologists, but I've got to admit, my closest friends are American psychologists. I still reckon that American psychologists are ahead over here, so don't show this in Australia, right? I won't be all that popular.
Is there anything that you care to say about crystal healing?
Well, I use them all the time now because,
understanding of it?
Aside from a teacher of metaphysics and of course the Globalite Inner Creativity course, and I teach Globalite Psychic Gateways course, but I'm a master healer. And I work specifically with grief recovery. In fact, I was just having a talk to a skeptic yesterday, and I was talking about Christmas. And he asked me what sort of Christmas I'd had, and I said, wonderful. I said, I make sure. I said, I don't need to do the toxic family fandango. I've been released myself from that, and I choose to spend this, because I'm not really into Christianity, so rather than the 25th, I do the solstice thing. I always celebrate the solstice, because that's really what it's all about, the changing of the seasons, and just Earth cycles. So I still do the Christmas thing, but it's basically solstice for me. And I told him I surround myself with people who love me, and therefore I can't miss. I can't go wrong. And he said, "Oh yeah, but do they really love you, or are they just And I'm going, no, these people really love me. I know they do."
Well, because there's some other love that's happening in your life too, right? Because it comes through in a session, or it comes through.
We share at such a deep level. When I have my hands on them, because I am an empath, all their physical pain, all their emotional pain, even some of their past life trauma, comes through me. And that is a closer sharing than a mother can have with a baby. I'm actually experiencing.
So you're reflecting it.
It passes through me. I'm not reflecting it. It passes through me as it leaves them. I would have it another way, because there's lots of times if it's really hard, the treatment is very, very uncomfortable for me. I mean, I worked on a woman a couple of years ago whose son had drowned here. Her only son had drowned. He got caught on a barbed wire fence, and she was trying to release him as the water was rising, and he drowned in her arms. And I got to see her 18 months, 2 years after he drowned. It was such a horrendous treatment when she came out of it great. I had to clench my teeth together the whole treatment to stop myself from screaming all the way through the whole thing, because I'm experiencing what she's experiencing. I'm taking that trauma away from her and using my body as a catalyst. And I make a lot of funny sounds. I wouldn't want you ever to televise me when I'm doing one of these, because my mouth, it's like I'm screaming without a sound. I make belches. It comes out of in a number of different ways. I can cough. I go into a massive coughing fit, but my body expels it whatever way it deems fit. And I don't hang on to it. I mean, it just passes through me, but it's gone from the client, totally gone. And they
sometimes, in the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about creativity through art, and we were talking about expectations.
Mm.
And so then, as a healer, without the lesser of expectations you would have, I think the lesser this thing that's channeling through you would create a wake. Maybe it would just pass through easier with it. If you, of course, you could say I prefer that it would happen in another way, and that in such a
it's
sense
all right,
it's
I
an
don't mind
expectation. But
there's times when I have to give my body up. That was the hardest thing. To actually step out of my body and let another entity take it in while I'm working on the table. Because one of the things that's in the article that's in the paper about me now, I was asked in that article whether or not we deal with with grief in our Western society, and I go, absolutely no, of course we don't. We have a tendency to be way too sophisticated about it. I think the more primitive, so-called primitive people have a much healthier way of dealing with grief than us sophisticated Westerners. I'm dealing with a woman now whose daughter was killed for unfortunate circumstances about 2 years ago, and she was saying, people come up to me, Penny, and say, it's 2 years since my daughter died, you should be over it now. And she said, and I'm going, no, you're over it when you're over it. And she's had 2 nervous breakdowns since her daughter died, and she's been coming to me for a couple of weeks, and she's laughing again. She said she still feels sad, but she wasn't able to laugh before. And she can think about her daughter without crying now. So it's like peeling an onion. Some people can move past it. I had a Canadian lady in the other day, and she wasn't even aware that she was still in grief. 4 years. She came to Australia after her long-time love of her life passed away. And I asked her if she was, because she'd come referred to me by this other woman, and I asked her if she was grief recovery. She said, oh, no. She said, I just came because this lady told me that you were really good and I should experience it. So I went, okay. Got her on the table, and of course, with what I do, I have to put in certain symbols. You know, like I have a certain way of, one of the symbols that I put in actually literally means, if you translate it into English, or roughly means, the Buddha in me wishes to speak to the Buddha in you, so our higher souls can communicate with one another. And so I've got this big string of symbols. Then I've got the colours I was just telling you about, because I still use them in the healing situation. I blow the colours through the client, and I imagine their body changing into the different colours. And then I do a summoning, because I've got these voices, remember? The people who didn't, the entities I never used to believe in, thank God they believed in me. So then I call in all of this, and I've got this whole healing circle, and believe me, it's not my imagination. The client on the table will say, oh, I saw big towers of light moving around the table. And go, oh, yeah, it's just some of my friends. They pay no attention. They're my mates. Well, this lady, the Canadian lady, she was on the table, and I had my hands on her, and as soon as the energy started flowing, there was a spirit, the deceased spirit there straight away. And I could always tell, because they're different than the ones who help me and guide, my assistants, my buddies, my mates. This one's quite different. And he was standing there just on the right-hand side of her, and he was determined to take me over straight away. And I kept on saying, no, wait, I've got all of this I've got to do first. I've got to put all of these symbols in. You're not going to heal her on your own. You'll be part of a healing circle. And I have to call in all of the other helpers, including my son. And so I call in all of these other helpers, and boy, bang, straight away. I was out my body. This entity came in straight away. I had no idea who he was. Didn't know anything about it, because this woman said emphatically she was not a grief recovery client. She'd just come from the experience. So I don't know who you are. So I just let it go. And he was most insistent. And also even the way, because they bring you back when you've got to change your hands to another position. Now, if it is one of my helpers that has taken me over, that they usually show me a picture to bring me back into my body, so I will move my hands from, say, the eyes to the ears or the throat or wherever I've got to move my hands. And they'll give me a picture of what they want me to do. And I come back long enough to change my hands, and then I'm gone again. This fellow wasn't. This fellow was quite different. Instead of showing me a picture, I was getting a picture, but it was of me taking my hands off quite violently, like that, which is something I wouldn't do, because I never ever take both hands off, because the energies are stopped. So I was just getting this message, take your hands off now, we need to put them somewhere else. But he didn't have any idea of how I work. And anyway, then and this is usually embarrassing for me, because when there's situations, especially if it's a new client, because we get to the end of it and they want me to tell them stuff, and I was going, and I've got to say things like, well, can't tell you anything really, because I wasn't here. Somebody else did the treatment, not me. And I look at, oh yeah, excuse me, like it's sort of, I don't know how to quite cope with that. But with this lady, I didn't need to. She was a bit disorientated when she came around. She said, that was absolutely amazing. And then she started talking about this. She said he was here. She said, I saw him so clearly. And she was still on my Reiki table. She said he was standing right there. She said, oh, I was looking up at him. I said, well, he didn't bloody stay there for long, darling. I said, he whipped into me and he worked on you the whole time. She said, I know he did. So that was...
So
she
that was who
wasn't
she
even
was grieving? That was who she was grieving for?
Yeah, well, but she wasn't even aware of the fact that she had any grief left. But there must have been something there to require that completion. She didn't seem as though she needed it, but the deceased spirit needed that completion.
So in other words, without even knowing it, somehow she navigated all the way from North America, Canada to Australia and looked you up and just said, hey, for no reason at all except curiosity, I should experience this.
She lives here now. The lady who referred her to me is an osteopath who works in the Tweed, who's wise enough to realise that sometimes long-term body problems are the result of unresolved grief.
Is it important, or is it that your helpers, do they have gender, or do they need it, or does it matter?
I hear this question so many times. To me, many of them, it depends on whether or not they're spirits or whether or not they're archangels. And believe me, I work with the archangels. They're the ones that spoke to me first. And I didn't believe in them at the time. That was real hard for me. I used to think they were a Christian myth, and I didn't want to know anything about it. So I backpedaled away from that. They're the ones that talk to me in my left ear. Now, because I didn't want to know anything about them, that's when I was forced to find out about them. And if you pick up half a dozen books on archangels, you'll have half a dozen totally different interpretations. So it's very, very, very difficult. But fortunately, they directed me to information. I like, for instance, I went, okay, why me? I figured that if there were such things as archangels, surely be to goodness, and they wanted a human to do work for them, surely they would choose somebody that A, believed in them, B, was pious or religious or something like that, which I wasn't.
Some kind of a monastery foundation or something like that.
Yeah. That was my and I didn't think that I was archangel contact material one iota. Quite the opposite, in fact. But so at one stage I actually asked them, I said, why me? Why me? Why did you choose me? And I said pretty much the same thing, like I would have thought you would have chosen somebody who believed in you. There's got to be artistic people out there who believe in them, but they chose one who didn't believe them. Why? That didn't make any sense. And they said, their answer was I accepted it after that. They said, because you are an unwritten parchment. You are free of all word and free of all dogma. See, it was really important that I didn't have any preconceived spiritual beliefs.
Brings us right back to who's the best artist. Some of these people that don't have any art background are creating amazing things, and somehow they are an unwritten parchment.
Well, I don't know. I can't put it from. I can only put it from my own perspective, and I don't know how many other. It'd be interesting to hear if anybody else has had the similar experiences as I have. But believe me, it wasn't. When you're a logical person, this sort of thing is scary. You do really believe that you're flipping out, and amazing things happened. Incredible things happened. I mean, there was no doubt about it. Then another time, somebody said, "How do you know that they're archangels and not some
demons?"
I don't use that word, and I'll explain to you why in a moment. And again, it was these archangels themselves explained why. But I thought, well, that's a jolly good question. I should work that one through. So I was actually travelling at the time. I was teaching in another state. And I came back here and I did all my rituals, and I sat down and called them all in, and I said, okay, this is a good question. And I did answer it by saying that because of the nature of the way of what they say to me when they're communicating with me, It's all uplifting. It's actually counteracting all the bad stuff I was taught about myself, like I'm useless, hopeless, dumb. I was 28 years old when I worked out I was intelligent. And that's pretty good programming. And so everything that they were saying to me was counteracting all this dark stuff that had been told to me. And I figured that wouldn't be happening if it was coming from a dark entity. And also there was emotions coming through it that was real love. Like, for instance, when I was doing this ritual on the beach, when Michael first spoke to me, and I wasn't really talking to an archangel. I was giving thanks for the element of fire, and I got to the element of fire, and the night before the power had gone off, and we lit a bank of candles, and my granddaughter and my daughter and I sat round and played this silly dice game they call Zilch, and we had cried with laughter. We'd had a great evening when normally they'd be down watching television. We interacted like an old-fashioned family together, having fun. And I thought about that when I got down to the beach, and I said to you, you've got to raise emotions. And I thought, yeah, that's a good one. And so I gave thanks for the night before with the bank of candles that enabled us to play this silly dice game. And I speak the words because it's not a head thing. You've got to speak the words. Your voice is a vibration. And I'm on a deserted beach in the middle of winter with nobody around, not a soul in sight, and I could see for a kilometre in either direction. And I just said, oh, and thanks for last night. You certainly bring light into a dark situation. And this voice in my left ear said, and so do you, my dear, so do you. And I was wrapped in this loving warmth at the same time. It freaked me out so much. I didn't do anything cosmic for about 6 months. I had to get the logical handle on why that had happened. It was a voice that was out loud. But anyway, after this trip, and this fellow had asked me, how did I know they were archangels? That was my answer, because I got this continual upliftment and not compliments, but encouragement. And it was always coming in with lots of loving energy. And anyway, so I gathered them all around the minute I got home. And this is typical. Now, you want to know how I know the stuff I know? This is the paper trail they never give me anything on a platter. You've got to be a Sherlock Holmes to be in this business. Because I said, well, okay, I answered that okay, but can you prove to me that you are who you say you are? And the answer was yes. You will find all the information that you need in the 7th Emerald Tablet. Never heard of the Emerald Tablet. Didn't know a thing about them. So then I got on to, I had a pretty good network by then. A lady who was involved in America in the American Philosophical Association, and asked her if she'd ever heard of the Emerald Tablets. And she actually bought and sent as a gift to me, Manly P. Hall's, the Diamond Jubilee edition of the
7th Emerald Tablet?
No, it wasn't 7th Emerald Tablet. It's the Encyclopedia of Rosicrucian, Hermetic and Kabbalistic philosophy, and there's a whole chapter on the Emerald Tablet that the Greeks were allowed to, the one that Alexander the Great put on public display. And so there was that, and then another woman who makes essences all around the world, who's an old friend who makes them power sites, and despite having taken a vow of poverty ends up going to amazing places all over the world by seeming miracles, even up into the Arctic Circle, to a set of standing stones that is so far up that the sun never sets on the summer solstice, and she gets to these places by miraculous means. So I got in touch with her, Raylene Brady, in case anybody wants to know. And she the essences are called Spiritual Voyages, Soul Quintessences, and they're amazing. I use them all the time with my clients. And so I got in touch with her. She was in Poland at that stage. And she said, I don't know either, Penny. But if you find out, let me know. Because they told me, my gods told me I'm aligned to the 10th Emerald Tablet. And I was going, okay, so there's more than 7 then. And then another very, very, very dear friend who is a Baha'i, and he used to be Dean of Art in Education at the university when I was there. But by this stage, he was in Haifa, working in the library in Haifa in Israel. And he is a Baha'i, of course. So I emailed him too, and he just sent me a transcript of the whole 15. Just straight through like that. And it's some of the wisest stuff I've ever read in my life, believe me.
Let me ask this, because...
The words of Thoth.
Right.
Right, you got it? They're the words of Thoth, the god Thoth.
Yeah. Let me ask, because you were doing you align certain things as your process, you call on certain things and you put some symbols, you load some symbols and so on. And then...
colors, the whole bit.
Colors.
Whatever it takes.
And then thinking about the crystal healing, for instance, that somehow some kind of vortexes or some energy field is adjusted in some way, right? Mm. And what I want to ask right now is is this specific to the Australian continent and to this primordial land and this southern hemisphere and this, is this...
I think so. I think you're right. There is something special here. Definitely. Don't know about the crystals, because the crystal healing is common, right? Just about in every culture.
Maybe you set them up in a different way, when you're...
I don't think it's to do with the crystals, but as far as the earth energy is concerned, the hill that I live on, is right on what the indigenous people of this country call a songline. And I've got a power side of my land. I've got there are also guardians of the hill. I used to wonder, because I remember I wasn't really into all of this when I first moved up here. I was more interested in getting Carmen through my granddaughter through her operations. But when I moved up on the hill, there were people who had built their dream home, lived in 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden the dream home's up on the market and they're out of there, and I'm asking them why, and they said, oh, it's those ghosts, I can't handle the Aboriginal ghosts. And I'm going, what Aboriginal ghosts? Well, now that I'm into this business, there are sacred guardians on our hill, and one of them at least, has given me his name. But and they haven't come when I've been doing work on clients initially, but when I started working on the power site, because the power site has been desecrated. Previous banana farmers, they blasted a standing stone that was there and bulldozed it over the side of the cliff. And what's left is a stump. The only reason why I knew that there was something odd there, and again the logic steps in, is we had a hoop pine, and you see it right from the veranda. It's right on the edge of a cliff going down. And I would see this hoop pine tree. We've got hoop pine trees in the creek over there, exactly the same type of tree. And I'd be looking at the tree and going, that tree glows. And not only does it glow, it glows electric blue every time there's a storm coming. Those ones over there don't do it. See the logical mind, why does that do it? So, and the grass was, what the long grass gets here. You're looking at something that can be almost 2 meters tall. So I go wandering down and had a look, and there's this stump sitting there, and the tree has grown up alongside it to replace the stone. And logic tells you that the roots of the tree
Are wrapping the stone, right?
are wrapping what's left of the stone under the ground.
So now, are these the guardians of the hill? Are they like they can't rest, or could they rest, or
They could. I mean, I'd do that sort of thing too, but
or could you help them rest?
I don't want to, because they're not meant to. They are the guardians, the hill. The hill itself was sacred. Apparently, the Bundjalung tribe in our area have lost so many of their songs and so much of their history, and they've been westernized more so than, like the indigenous people inland.
Decimated, in other words, westernized.
I don't like calling them Aboriginal, and they don't like being called Aboriginal.
Just call them original.
Yes. First Nation.
Yeah.
The First Nation. Give them the right. They were here first. And they're very, very wise people.
Let me ask this now. Have you gone back to Tasmania? And what about your old farm? Was that a PowerPoint too that you didn't realize at the time?
Oh, I would say almost
definitely.
Definitely.
Have propelled you into this whole Melu?
Even from my childhood. I was born in Singapore. And then we came to Tasmania when I was very, very young. And there were many places that we went to that were obviously sacred sites in Tasmania, and places that I used to dream about afterwards. There was one place that's still there, Goat Island. You could only get to it at low tide. And there's caves with carvings all over the walls, spiral carvings, and a most amazing place.
Are they accessible just to general public, or are they made
Yeah.
into a national park yet? Or
Well, I don't know. It's been 17 years, but I doubt it.
Just
You
nobody
can get
knows
it.
where they are?
I don't know how much common knowledge it is. We knew. We were told. We were kids brought up. And, oh, yes. They fenced off an area at the Bluff at Devonport where you can see the carvings in the rock. And Goat Island is a little bit more inaccessible than that, because you can only access it when at low tide, and then you've got to get off there unless you want a big long wait. And you've got, I mean, it's not a big island. It doesn't take you much exploring before you find the cave where the carvings are. And there's also another one on the seaside where you can actually see that there's been other activities done there.
Let me shift gears a little bit, Penny. Let me ask you some other questions, because we live in amazing times, right?
We do.
And so then much of your work has been focused on individuals and somehow clearing them and making them more productive in their families and
also
in society, right?
My other modus operandi is to help everybody awaken the inner avatar. That's what my classes are all about.
So then, in other words, not only you can be connected, but you can teach people to
Absolutely.
Connect, right?
I don't want to be the only...
No, that's too much.
I don't want to be the only one. I don't want to be the only one doing this. It's really... And also, the other thing is, okay, I'm a good healer. I've got a good... No, I'm a good front woman for a good healing group, okay? I don't like to take...
Right on.
But I can do amazing things, or amazing things happen through me. Except I can't work on myself. Because when I go into these states and I'm working on other people, I go into a vision. Sitting straight upright, I see lots of things. I'm a visionary. It happens all the time. When I put my hands on myself and I go through the whole palaver, I start seeing those visions. My brain says, oh, I'm having visions. They must be dreams. I must be asleep. And I go to sleep and my hands fall off. So, I'm not a fool. I train people up to my level. So I've got people to help me when I need it.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to ask, because I was saying, you were chosen in a way. You're a chosen one.
Yes,
and
I
so
am.
Something like that. And then I said,
I hate.
Could this be passed on? Because, what about the sorcerer's apprentice, I mean, is there such a thing as a sorcerer's apprentice, or is that just, you just have to wait to be chosen?
It's not everybody, but every now and then, I can help everybody. But really, every now and then, I have the honour of teaching a star, somebody with the similar potential, and the other thing that is exciting.
Does that mean they have to be a blank slate, and not, not blank parchment?
Most of them have been. I've got to admit they have been. The other thing that I like about it is some of them, I can't tell you who they are, but when I was running my, how I started the Psychic Gateways course was I had a number of clients up in Brisbane, and they asked me, could I teach? They all knew my story, and they all really liked me, and I can be a bit in your face at times, and they all wanted to know if I could teach them or show them the things that brought me back from the dark night of the soul and low self-esteem to being the rude, crude, unattractive old Sheila that you see in front of you that really enjoys life now. And I went, oh yeah, I could manage that, because I was up there in Brisbane. Then I came back and I sat down and went, what did I do? Went into a panic, and then all my guides, once again, this is what I mean about I live with a crowd, even though nobody can see them, and they go, mellow out, it's all fine, we'll help you. And then the power went off. We get that from time to time around here, in case you haven't noticed, with these storms. And the power went off, and I lit the candles, and there was a piece of paper sitting in front of me. I just picked up a pen and went, and by the time the power came on, it was all there. The whole class format was there. So I started, I said, okay, because some of these things, okay, an introduction to the Kabbalah, to the esoteric Kabbalah. And the whole idea of teaching these things is I don't want this to be just a mind exercise. I want them to have tools. I run the classes 1 day a month. So if you do what I tell you to do every day for 1 month, then come back and we'll talk about it. So I always had to leave half an hour or 3/4 of an hour, because I teach them esoteric practices. Then they come in, and at the end of the month, and all they want to do is go, oh, and this happened to me, and I felt this, and I saw that. So they get the wow factor straight away. I don't do blind faith, Richard. Never have. Can't handle it. So it's got to have a wow factor. It's got to deliver the goods, as far as I'm concerned. So the first class was the introduction to the Kabbalah, and then I go back the next, a month later, and it's what's the next one? Working with archangels. But I always chuckle in. These were the people who wanted me to create this course in the first place. So I'm using them as my guinea pigs. But when you read through my list of students there in Brisbane, it read like the who's who of power women in Brisbane. And I'm not going to mention any names, but we had a senior administrator in Queensland Health. We had a senior bureaucrat. We had a legal advisor. We had we're talking about women who have got stacks of degrees, and they were running through this and really going for it. Well, 2 of those, that's another thing why I call it gateways, because each one of the things I teach is really an introduction to more learning. It was just, okay, an introduction to the Kabbalah. You can't learn anything much in 1 day, but I can teach you the words of power, and in Hebrew, and I can tell you why Hebrew works, and I can tell you a lot of interesting stuff about it, and I can send you away with a little piece of paper, and if you go out and you do all of the right things, you say the words, and you picture the things I tell you, they come back with the wow factor well and truly in place, and they're raring for the next one. So then I take them through the archangels, and then I teach them how to create sigils of summoning, and they go on again, and then the next month the wow factor is huge, and you see it just rolls in one on top of the other as we blindly carry on right from the beginning to the end. It's a bit of an adventure. And the last class is the Tao Buddhist Pairs of Karmic Completion, where you can actually end all kinds of family feuds, and you can end a lot of stuff with that. But That's an easy one. It only takes half a day to show them how to set up an altar for it, how to do the words of power. And of course, everybody brings a plate at lunchtime here, you know, it's the standard procedure. So then we have our lunch. And the afternoon, they don't get it in an early minute on the last day. This is a little trick I picked up from Stephanie Merritt, my lecturer in psychology. Well, the afternoon, their last afternoon is dedicated to honour thy teacher, which means they have to honour me. But the deal is that they're not allowed to spend any money. That's the absolute bottom rule. That forces them to actually put into practice some of the things they've learned during the last 6 months.
They have to create, right?
Yeah. They have to be creative, and they have to work as a team. And I've been so proud of some of my groups. They've come up with some wonderful ideas, and I always get a big zing out of it, and I always get a healing out of it. And
wow, fantastic.
You know.
No, I guess I was asking because I set up that one question that said you've got a real facility working with individuals. Now it comes out that you're teaching groups, you're facilitating people to be connected themselves. So then you're multiplying yourself in that way.
Yeah.
And I guess my other question was, is there any way that you can work with a nation or work with a city or work with the world population or the Middle East situation or the Egyptians in Tahrir Square
now you're touching on a touchy subject. Look,
You're not doing it anyhow.
I am, but I'm doing it in a different way.
No, I mean the group of your helpers is doing it, so then they just need you to be open for it, don't
yeah,
they?
Yeah. With the Middle Eastern situation, I just can't remember his name now. There was a man in America that I was following at the time. Just can't think of his name, but I'm sure somebody who's watching this will probably know. He wanted to get 100,000 light workers together just before the Iraqi war came about. And we had weeks to practice beforehand, which, he gave us these exercises to do to increase our gifts, and he wanted 100,000 of us to see if we could deflect the war in Iraq. And I joined that willingly. Did all my exercises, did everything. And we were supposed to be doing it all at the same time, every day for a number of days. And I I did all my exercises. I joined in with everybody else. Went down onto my power site. Whether or not that had anything to do with it, I don't know. But I can't go into details. Well, I could, but you'll have to edit it out. So what do you think you need to edit out? But this is quite real. We did it once, and it left me very, very vulnerable for a long time in regard to negative energy attachments. I went down the power site. We were to do Saddam Hussein first, and I pictured him in my mind. And then once again, you see, the logic doesn't help very much, because as far as I'm concerned, when I put a picture in my mind, it's me putting it there. When I'm using my imagination, I decide I want to see this. And okay, I saw Saddam Hussein, and then I saw a couple of dark figures around behind him, and I thought, that's interesting, because we were going to share what we picked up at the end of it on this website. And I went, I must remember that to put on the website. And didn't have any trouble putting the energy into Saddam Hussein. And then it was George Bush. And again, I saw him side on. And this was where I got really frightened, Richard. And I still would like some logical explanation from this one. Because I pictured him side on. But then as soon as I saw him, there were a lot of dark figures. Not just two. There were a lot behind him. And I went, okay, well, must remember to put that on the website and see what other people picked up. And then because I'm a Westerner, I'm on your side, mate. And anyway, so I sent the love into him, and look, honestly, it was the scariest thing that ever happened. He responded exactly And this is my imagination. This is my brain. How dare it be taken over like that and just change from what I wanted to see? Straight away, it was like he was a school teacher in a class and some kid had got a ruler and just flicked him with a paper pellet and pinged him in the side of the face, and he swung his head around and looked me straight in the eyes like, who did that? It was instant, and at the same time that happened, I got excruciating pain right around the band, right around my solar plexus. It was it hit me just like that. And I didn't ever do it again. It took me a few days to actually, and I'm not in part of some circuit or anything. I didn't know how to protect myself. I didn't know that I even needed to protect myself.
Did you put that on the website?
No.
That would have been
I stepped right away from the whole thing. I was scared. Look, I was seriously scared about that. And
that would be a great contribution on that website, because then other people could say, look, I need to protect myself, or we got to kind of take this and reboot it and think of another way to do it. I didn't know what
was going on. I couldn't even rationalize what was going on.
Well, I mean, then you have to just share that there's no rational explanation.
Well, that was a lot of years ago, and I'm a wiser old Sheila these days, darling.
Okay. Okay, well, those are pretty good questions I wanted to know. But I mean, I don't know, like, in many ways we don't know what's going to happen, right?
There's one thing that I want to say, and I think it's really important that people know this. Okay, now, with these archangelic beings that come to me, one of the first things, and this one, you talk about putting things out into the planet, this one made a lot of sense to me. One of the things that they really hammered into me right from the word go is that humanity is keeping evil alive by believing in it. They said that if everybody stopped believing, that's why you use the word demon. I won't use it because they don't let me, because that's personifying something that isn't what you imagine it to be. Okay. They said if everybody stopped believing in evil incarnate tomorrow, it would cease to exist.
So does it have to be everybody, or can it be a critical mass?
I'm not sure about that, because when I've been on the other side, I have seen religious entities that I don't believe in, because I'm not a Hindu or I'm not a da-da-da-da-da-da, but there is no doubt that they exist as a very real thought form on another plane. We do have the spark of the Creator in it, and what we absolutely believe in intensely, we create it on another level. You know, I'm a shaman. I go onto those other levels. I can see what's going on, and I find that's very, very interesting that we have that power to create. And I mean, when they first started telling me this business about, you've got to stop believing in evil incarnate and everything like that, because we are creating it. They said that all evil would cease to exist on the planet if we stopped believing in it. Everybody. And I mean, that's a hard ask, because some people
that's what they're working for us. They're working through us for that, and somehow that it has to seem logical, right? Because somehow it has to be a linear trail that leads somewhere, and it's.
Well, here's a prime example. I mean, I use this with, because I do teach Indigenous people. I go up to Cairns, and sometimes some of them have been through, they've been brought up in Christian situations, and a lot of them really take on this business of fearing the devil. And the way I usually handle that one when I'm teaching is I say, because I'm a logical Sheila, I say, okay, everything breaks down. I mean, we talked earlier before this interview started about the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity. You saw that in my artwork. Okay, everything breaks down into that. Everything, absolutely everything fits on the tree of life, one way or another, and even emotions. So, okay, the pillar of mercy on the plus side, on the white side, you've got compassion, love, understanding, mercy itself, so on and so on and so on. However, on the dark side, you've got jealousy, anger, resentment, etc., etc. You've also got fear. It's on the dark side. It's not on the light side. It's a dark emotion, not a light emotion. And I usually then throw the class open and I say, okay, well, I don't buy into it, but I appreciate that you guys do. Let me just pretend for one moment that there is this prince of evil, this prince of darkness out there. Tell me, how would you imagine that this prince of darkness would like to be worshipped? I even had one woman that said, he'd like to be loved. And I said, I don't think so. Love is on the white side, remember, on the side of wisdom. I rather think that this prince of darkness, if you love this prince of darkness, it would pretty well make him want to puke. However, don't you think he would like to be feared? So if you fear...
Wow, that is so cool what you're saying. So
isn't it?
So you're saying if you hate the devil and you fear the devil, you're actually worshiping the devil.
Exactly.
That's the worship that
The
he's
thing to
commanding.
do. I was actually talking to a man the other night who is a brilliant, brilliant man. This man is a mathematical genius savant. And we were chatting about a number of things. I'm so honoured to have met him. And I was talking about a number of different things, not that one particularly. And he actually came up with it himself. This man creates art by programming his computer with mathematical equations, and he's made a program that can turn them into pictures. Oh, that's pretty impressive. And he said to me, the way to deal with it all, he said, is always face the light. He said, if you turn the other way, all you see is the darkness and the shadow. And that is exactly what it's all about, Richard. Always, always, always face the light. And you remember we started this conversation with colour?
Yeah.
Every single one of those colours is hidden in the light.
It's in the light, huh?
It's all part of the same thing. It's taken me all these years, and now I'm an old lady, and I've finally cracked it. I know what it's all about, but putting it all into words sometimes isn't easy.
We've said many times, like, face the wind, right? Face the wind is the secret to life, which the wind would be like adversity, right? Not necessarily go into it, but face it, and just and face up to it, and somehow acknowledge it and let it in a way consume you, so then you'll find out what it's made of. Hey, come on, show me your stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then that's when you really diffuse a lot of things. So then face the light when you're talking about the forces.
Yeah. You've always got to move towards the light. You've always got to move towards the light. That's my motto. Always.
Totally fascinating, Penny, I tell you.
I know.
We could go on and on, I
know.
tell you.
But here's another one for you. When I was having one of those sessions with Roman, he took me, because the year before I had been in America, and I had been interviewing American Indian people for my thesis.
So the context, Roman was a while ago, and you haven't seen him in a while, or what's the story?
As soon as the communist thing fell down in Russia, Roman immediately decided that he was needed at home.
All right.
He went back to Russia.
Right on.
Yeah, but he had actually been a Uniting Church minister in the town he kept on getting sacked with monotonous regularity, but he was the only person that could fill a church. He used to fill the church every Sunday with people who would never normally go to church.
Wow.
And one of the times he got sacked, there's these beautiful waterfalls near Deloraine, which is the town near my farm, and they're called the Liffey Falls, and they're just a whole series of different, and each lot of falls is quite different than the other. So as you walk through the falls, you're looking at something completely different. but they're quite easily accessible. The first one is quite easily accessible from the road. And one beautiful spring morning, and the sun was out, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky, Roman marched into the church, and he looked at everybody and said, "It's a beautiful, beautiful day out there." And he said, "So I'm going to make a few changes to today." He said, looked at his watch, he said, "I'm not going to start the service here today." He said, "I'm going to start it in half an hour's time up at the first of the Liffey Falls, and we will go out and we will conduct today's service out in God's own church." And boy, oh boy, every single woman who was there with high heel shoes complained about him. I'm not going to say anything. This man was incredible. He was a visionary. He was a brilliant man. But he took me into this one place, and he told me beforehand that I was going to meet this wise person, because I'd been interviewing Indians the year before, and that I was allowed to ask him one question, and I was to sit down and think beforehand about what question I'd like to ask him, and once again, write down the question. Still to this day, can't remember what I wrote down. And that he was going to give me gifts. And you asked about the crystals before. I wasn't into crystals at all. This is the weird stuff that went on. It was life that taught me everything I know, not books. Anyway, I set off on this journey with Roman, and as it transpired, and this was the most amazing experience. It really was incredible. He was an old Indian sitting up on the top of a rock. He was just sitting there meditating, looking in the fire. He had a deformity. He had like a pigeon chest. So his plaits came out over here, and they were ratty, and he was old. But his face was very peaceful. Now, I'm coming up a hill, and I'm coming around the base of the rock, and Roman got me to stop at the base of the rock and look at this old boy. He didn't say it was an Indian. Never said, he just said a wise person. You're going to meet a wise person. Didn't give sex, racial characters, nothing. My own mind was one that filled this lot in. My soul, perhaps, I don't know. And so he said, "Now, stop when you can see this person, and formulate an opinion of them." And I was looking up at him. I was looking straight into his face, and it didn't look like he could see me, because I'm in the dark down there, and he's got to look through the flames. It's highly unlikely that he could see me. And my first reaction, I was so together in these altered states. I'm myself. And I thought, oh, what a pity I didn't have a chance to interview you last year. You look like a really interesting person to talk to, even though he wasn't one of the ones I'd seen the year before. And then, as soon as my finger went up, like I told you before, then Roman said to me, "And now you're the wise person looking back at this person who's come to interrupt your reverie." And I'll tell you something, Richard, that was one of the most profound things. I told you that some miraculous stuff happened during his sessions. When I was me, and all that time I was travelling to that point and looking up at him, I was Mum, who was going through incredible grief and confusion at the loss of son. She's fighting a custody battle. My whole world had fallen apart. My blood pressure was right up through the roof. I was a mess. That's what was in me. But when he got me to go into the person, I suddenly became that person up there. I was a completely different person. I might have a few aches and pains like I do now, because the old body's wearing out. Exactly, I can relate to him now, I'll tell you. But basically, I definitely didn't have any grief. I didn't have any confusion. I didn't have anything like that. I was completely and utterly at peace. I was not only at peace with my surroundings, I was in a gentle peace with who I was, what I had contributed in my lifetime, and what I was still contributing in my own way. I was perfectly comfortable with who I was, where I was, every minute of the day, and I don't think I'd ever experienced that in my whole life. It was completely foreign to me. And yet here I was experiencing it. And then Raymond got a seesawing back. 1 minute I was him, 1 minute it was me, 1 minute. And by the time it came to the point where I had to ask him a question, that's why I don't remember what I wrote on the paper. There was only one question I could possibly ask this man. What do I have to do to be like you all the time and feel like you all the time? What do I have to do? What do I have to learn to be like you and feel like you do all the time? And his answer was, and it stuck in my mind, I still tell my students, I've even done artwork based on this, be the tree. Be the tree. Feel your roots extend to the very centre of the earth. Stand tall. Reach for the sky and bend in every gale. And then it came time for him to give me the gifts. And I put my hand out, and what did he put in my hand but these 3 little round glassy pebbles, which later, after the meditation, I found out, again, hadn't seen them before, Apache tears. That's what they're called, Apache tears. And as luck would have it, this old friend of mine who actually had passed through cancer had left me a whole heap of geological samples, including a bag of Apache tears. And that bag had broken in my garage. This is going back, we're going forward now, okay? Probably a year, 2 years maybe. And my late son's best friend was up helping me clean the garage. And of course there's all kinds of rubbish in there, you know, I'm not the most organised person in the world, so he was swept all the mess into the middle, and he was pulling out nails and screws, and I had a farm, I've always been a practical girl, and all this other stuff, and there's sawdust and so on. And he picked up one of these Apache tears, which must have fallen out of the bag, and he said, "What do you want me to do with this, Penny?" And I said, "Oh, I know what that is, don't worry, pass it over here, I'll take it up to the house." And then another car arrived with friends that had arrived from Hobart, and of course, you know, it's the usual thing here. The blokes all go off to the garage together, and the Sheilas go into the kitchen, and we get the cuppers ready. And so I trucked up to the house with my friend, and I had this piece of Apache tear in my hand, and we were just chatting. We hadn't seen each other for, so, you know, gossip. And we got inside, and I thought, this is weird, because this stone was getting red hot in my hand. It got real hot. It got to the point where I could almost not hold on to it. And I said, I told her, I said, "Lee," I said, "this stone I'm holding onto has just got ridiculously hot." I said, "You feel it?" And she opened up her hand like that, and I just dropped it in. She closed it, and she said, "Oh, that's really, really hot." No, it's not. She felt it when it touched her hand and she closed. It lost its heat instantly as soon as she closed her hand around it. And that wasn't a dream. That was real life. And that was my own first. Okay, I told you about the student and, you know, at uni, and how she said that crystal healing was the only thing that helped her. But I hadn't had a crystal healing at that point. I had nothing to do with it. And here it was. There was again, and when she passed it back to me, got hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. It was not my imagination. So it was the crystals themselves that taught me about crystals. Okay? Wasn't any fandangled book or DVD. It was real life.
So much in life to look into.
Oh yeah, life is an adventure.
Yeah. Just to be open to it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of probably the reasons why these light beings, that's another thing that most people don't realise. That was what confused me too, because I don't see them as people as wings. Not unless they're posing for a painting or a drawing. I mean, you You may chuckle at that, but that's not so silly. They've done that. We want you to portray us like this. And then I get this vision in my mind. But when I'm interacting with them, they've always been beings of light. And they're different coloured light. That's how I can identify them, like yellow or blue or red. And sometimes they're multicoloured. I find Sachiel is gold and violet together. And some of them have got even more colours than that. So it was ages later when I started getting involved in the esoteric Kabbalah, and that was another thing that blew me away. I was going, well, blow me down. There you go. Another one, another tick in the box. I discovered with the names, the Hebrew names, they aren't names, they are a description. And I discovered that the suffix at the end of the Hebrew names, so when you have a look, Mikael, Raphael, Uriel, Sachiel, Zadkiel, Raguel, they've all got the same suffix at the end of the name. It's got the same, it means something. It means being of light. For instance, Raphael, Rapha means healing. Al means being of light who heals. That's why I get a bit cross with certain people who shall remain nameless, who name all their archangels things like Sue and Betty and Florence, and I'm going, they've got their names, and their names tell you what they do if you want to translate it. Please, please, use them. And here's another one, that AL. If you look at all the different languages, and I can email you this page to prove that I'm telling you the truth, Sumerian, Babylonian, Hebrew, Celtic, ancient English, and Old English, you can go through them all. Here's a good one for you. This will blow you away. They all sound something similar. AL, L, Ellie. Old English is elf, ELF. Okay? That is the suffix that means being of light. And as I say to all my students, hey, doesn't that rather put a different connotation on the word self?
Elf.
Self.
So we're all beings of light.
We
right?
all have the capacity of being beings of light. And I say to everybody, get on with it. Raise the avatar within. Find out how. Do it. It is our salvation.
Thank you, Penny. Fabulous. So fascinating.
You're welcome, darling.
Okay, Penny Chesney. And so thanks for listening and following this fascinating voyage. And there's so many other places to go and dig in and find the elf in yourself and
exactly.
And find out, research it, get involved, try it out.
And always face the light.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you. Oh, wasn't that good? I enjoyed that. I didn't know how I was going to go before I got here, but I enjoyed that.